Good evening and welcome to the post-film discussion for Ladybuds. This evening, we've got our distinguished guests, and I'll introduce them in a second. My name is Russell Roots, and I am the Community Outreach Manager with the Utah Film Center. So for introductions this evening, first we have Christine Stenquist. Christine is a brain tumor patient, the daughter of a narcotics officer, and a cannabis advocate. She has a medical background as a self-taught cannabis policy wonk. Christine created the cannabis movement in Utah and helped pass our law. She founded and runs the nonprofit TRUCE, Together for Responsible Use in Cannabis Education, and offers assistance federally and internationally. Christine, thank you for joining us this evening. Joining us as well is April Miera. April is the owner of Terra Health and Wellness, a health clinic that provides medical cannabis cards and other services. She comes from a medical background as a case manager for patients, which yields a firm understanding of the patient's struggles in the healthcare system. She sees similar differences in the similar deficiencies in the medical cannabis arena. April, thank you for joining us. And last but certainly not least is Mindy Madeo. Mindy is a pharmacist at the dispensary Beehive Farmacy in Brigham City. She's a good auntie and has been a fierce patient advocate, but also balances the delicate work of educating patients, caregivers, colleagues, legislators, and regulators. Mindy ensures that those in the industry are good stewards by speaking up for patient safety and concerns, and it's their safety and the concerns in many of the rooms that we aren't in. So thank you, Mindy, for joining us. All right. So I'm going to open up this conversation because this is a really fun one. It's a really great film. I think this has been a wonderful experience. Let's just start off with something simple. What does this film mean to each of you? And I will start with Christine.
Oh, I could identify with Felicia just as an advocate who ran for office, who had just a life-changing experience with the plant. I dove right into helping create a movement here in my own home state because I knew policy had to change. So there was so much about that film that I just really, truly related to, the whole arc for a lot of those people who have been in this space for a long time. I've been in this space for 10 years now, advocating, working in this state and in other states and back in DC. And it's grown a lot. We've seen a lot of growth, a lot of acceptance and understanding. So it was a beautiful film. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I highly agree. April, your thoughts? I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay. For me, I really saw my story in a lot of the women, but definitely the women of color in the film really brought home to me sometimes that there's these other struggles that don't get a lot of airtime. And at one point when they spoke about passing something on to our children generationally, that really spoke to me that trying to build a company that my kids will be proud of one day. And I would love an opportunity to generationally change some things in our culture that hadn't been given that time. So I really saw that enough.
Okay, great. And Mindy?
I saw myself in a lot of the women. They all had a lot of passion for what they did. And I think it's almost unexplainable. Like you end up putting more energy into this field than you get in return. Yeah. And it's something that I would describe once you see the healing power of cannabis, it is so hard to just walk away. You can't leave. There's been times when I've not been able to work in this industry and I couldn't just I couldn't give it up. And I really relate to a lot of these women. I think they were the same thing where they felt like it was their calling or their mission in life.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's wonderful. I think I'm gonna stick with you, Mindy, to kind of tell us a little bit more about your perspectives on the state of cannabis industry in Utah. So I want you to kind of elucidate on that for us.
I would say it's very messy. And to me, it kind of mirrors Utah politics. I feel like there's a lot of politics that are involved in the cannabis space. And there's a lot of lobbyists. There's a lot of groups really trying to position themselves to get the most money possible. But I also want to say that there's also a lot of really amazing, wonderful people in the space. And the thing that makes it messy is sometimes those are the same people. Sometimes the people that are trying to get the money and build their businesses also have good intentions. And to me, it's very frustrating sometimes and contentious. I don't like the fighting. I don't like when groups don't get along, and we all, a lot of us have the same goal. And sometimes it's just such noise to me that I have to remember that my reason for being there is the patients, and I just focus on them. So I really think it's hard to stomach sometimes, but if you can just focus on helping patients, I think that that's how I get through it.
Okay. And Christine, I know you have thoughts. What's your perspective in this space?
I do. It really is hard when you're advocates and you're advocating for the industry to get here. You're all in the foxhole together. You're all in the same foxhole together. And then when money enters the scene, it changes the dynamics a bit. Patients, and it's not just Utah, I must emphasize, it is the entire space. And it's been like this since it happened in California in 1996 with the Prop 215 coming online. Like, it's been part of a problem that patients are used to share the stories, to invoke compassion, a plea to others to let us have safe access. And then once that hurdle has been reached, it seems like patients kind of get pushed to the background as everybody's scrambling to make their money. And so Mindy's right. I do see those who sometimes are the same people who were in those foxholes with us, duking it out with all the opposition and all those people who didn't like us for years and years and years and wanted us to just go away and stop talking about the wacky weed. They are now some of the people who are making a lot of money off of patients who can't afford the cannabis. And that's the people that they supposedly fought for. So I, as a patient advocate, I see a different perspective. I would like the industry to not be so expensive, because we are still having patients that can't afford it, and they're just being pushed back to the legacy market, back to the traditional market. And what's the point in having a program if you can't have patients afford to be able to use the product? So there's things to iron out still, but it's kind of amazing that Utah has a medical cannabis program. So yeah, we're all working for the same goal. We absolutely are.
Wonderful. How, you bring up an interesting point about the price controls, or at least the lack of price controls. How do you institute those to make sure that the products actually do stay within the reach of the patients who need them?
Well, it's basic economics. It's a supply demand situation. In Utah, we have a limited license, a bit of a cartel, if you will, a state-run one. So the state decided 8 people could have grows and handed those out to certain people. 15 people could have dispensaries, and they handed those out to certain people, meeting some kind of magical criteria. And then those people are the ones that are able to control the market. Mm-hmm. It's not a true free market. It's dictated by those people. And a true meaning of a cartel is a group of individuals that control the market. So until that monopoly sort of breaks up, I don't know how the prices are going to shift. We need more people growing, and we need the competition. It breeds better pricing, but it also breeds quality. And that's a big concern that we're having when we have a limited license and there's only 8 growers. You only get so much selection. It's benefiting the business and not the patient. So I would like to see more licenses released in our state. But April, I know her running an industry, she's seen firsthand how financially it's burdensome for patients. She's the one that offers discounts. She can see it from that perspective for sure.
April, your thoughts?
Yeah. So first of all, what do I think the state of the industry here in Utah? I think it's a young market. I think it's in its infancy. I do come from a healthcare background, and so I will say that a lot of the issues I see in the cannabis industry are mirrored in healthcare. Cost for medication has always been an issue. Insulin prices go off the charts. So I definitely appreciate the conversation. When I came into this space, one thing I think that I really saw lacking, even within the political arenas, within different industry folks, was an education aspect. And I'm really strong in an education aspect. I really specialize in patient experience. And so I've always, felt for patients, cost is a discussion. Access is a discussion. But when you're sick and you're just coming out of the ICU and you're discharging and you're desperate, you don't always have time for some of those discussions. You're in a very unique situation. And I really try to meet that need in those particular situations. Some patients really aren't in a situation to wait 5 years to kind of wait for legislation to pan itself out. And they're not in a position to wait for their doctor to find the right studies and he might talk about it next year. They need help today. They're having seizures today. They have children that are, in dire need and terminal today. And I have been extremely lucky in a unique position that I work with providers who are really cutting edge. They're really putting their careers out there. Myself stepping out of the healthcare space to say I work on this plant was very hard. The stigma is really hard. You run the risk of losing kind of all your legitimacy. But it is that you have to meet patients where they are, and whether they can't afford their medication at the doctor's office, at the pharmacy, at the dispensary, they still need the education, because lowering costs doesn't change anything if they don't understand the plant. And if they don't have the education piece, and we as a state and we as a program and we as providers don't tell patients really how to use the plant, it doesn't matter if we lower the cost, because they're going to continue to buy ineffectively. So I think for me, it was just so important that I stay on the ground floor. I like patients, I like the patient experience, but part of it is noise, and it's going to continue to be noise, but it's not going to change the patients today who need help today. They don't have time to wait for the laws to change. And so I think we're really trying to meet them there at Terra Health.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you can definitely tell your passion. And I think the thing is like, I'm a little curious, like, can you tell us a little bit more of what led you out of the medical industry into the industry you're in now?
Like we've all said, advocacy starts with this calling, this overwhelming need. I'd always had an interaction and some experience with the plant, and I've worked closely with patients dying and terminal for many years. And you see patients use the plant, but you also see them be really dishonest with their medical teams because they don't have legal access. They're terrified they might lose care. Insurance companies might deny their claims. So you see this dishonest relationship happen, and the support staff is always there, and we see it. And that really broke my heart, that the patient can't be honest, the doctor can't talk to them because they're afraid of their license. And what happens is the patient uses anyways, they don't get quality product, they are out in the community just, buying it wherever. And for me, that just wasn't okay. So when I saw legalization happen, for me, it was that one opportunity to go, legal access is here. I don't determine what the program looks like, but darn it, if I can help a patient get legal access so that they can focus on their chemo, well, then I've done something within myself. If this mom can control a child's seizure, so she might go to a yoga class, then we've done something here. So that is what got me in. And that's when I really just said, this is unique. Let's act on it now, because in healthcare, they're yearning for education. I believe it. They're looking for a safe place to get that. So.
Okay, thank you. Christine, do you have thoughts about this as the person on the panel who started off as a patient?
Well, I have to thank both these ladies. It is such a tough space. It is really a tough space. And as an advocate for a long time here, you're a bit of a soldier, a social justice warrior sort of on an issue that really nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to take it on. It's too much. And for a lot of years, I was fighting against a tide. And it's really nice to come back into the space and see how many people are really trying to help patients, and from different perspectives. Like April mentioned, it's not the program some of us want. It's not ideal in a lot of scenarios. It is problematic. I know Mindy probably hears complaints at the pharmacy. It's got its hoops that you have to jump through. And that's the stuff that's my job. That's the shit I complain about. But these ladies are doing their best within the constructs that our legislators put together, and our regulators. It's not just the legislators, trying to help guide patients to relief. And that's why I respect and honor their efforts in this space. I know they're trying to help the people I'm trying to help too. It is young. It is a young, I think we're only open 2 years this year, 2022. We've been open. We opened up in the middle of COVID. March 1st, 2020 is when our doors opened, and COVID, I mean, we had lockdown on March 12th. The fact that our state viewed cannabis as a vital industry that needed to stay open, that speaks volumes to where we are right now. I am floored by that kind of action that's being taken. It was a very different response from the church than I see from them now, the LDS church. I see there is some more acceptance, but we do need some more social change to happen. And a bit of the reason why I wanted April to be here is she is a person of color, and her community has been affected by prohibition and has been specifically targeted. As I mentioned, my father is a narcotics officer, and so I saw the drug war growing up in the 70s and the 80s from a very different lens. And when I needed to use it as a patient, it really opened up my perspective a little more about the racism. And I need others to speak about that, because it's your communities that are being affected. So I'd love to give April an opportunity, and you, Russell, to talk about that a little bit, because it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed. I see a lot of white privilege in this space, and I think we need to talk about some heavier topics. We can't be having people in jails for a plant. It's got to change.
Well, and just to add to that piece, you know, a lot of times when I hear social equity come up, I hear the next conversation is incarceration and helping folks in incarceration. And I do want to say social equity does not always factor in incarceration, because as a minority, you don't always want to have that attachment. You don't want everyone to think, well, the only way we help social equity is if we bail people out. Because I do think there are people in jail who don't deserve to be there, but there's also individuals, you know, you can have an abuelita who's 80 years old, who's been cooking with this plant, and she can't name it, but she knows this plant. She knows her people, her ancestors. She knows this plant, but she also knows that her government was not okay with people who look like me touching this plant. So for them, it's not a matter of helping people in jail. It's a matter of reminding some folks that you do have a relationship with this plant, and you do have a right to be proud of what your ancestors have done with this plant in a way that isn't always tied to incarceration or these other negative aspects, because I want minorities and underrepresented groups to say, we can be proud. We should be able to apply at dispensaries and feel comfortable. We shouldn't be concerned that our community, our elders are going to go, Mija, what are you doing? You are not supposed to do that. You know that that's not acceptable for us. I need to be able to have that conversation in my own community, but I know that part of it has to be separated from this conversation of incarceration, because it automatically ties us to incarceration.
Absolutely. And I think that's a wonderful way to put it. You know, with so many things, I think there is this duplicitous nature of what we feel is the right way to do things, and then it is applied to everyone else differently, particularly, you know, people of color. So it's a fascinating examination of what really happens within this country from a legal standpoint. But like, I can't get started, though I appreciate the offer to get started, because like we'd be here all night, and that's not what we're here to do. So you know, we do have a quote here from one of the folks in the audience. Cost is important for patients, but legal protections under the law are essential too. So I think, you know, that is really what we're trying to get at the heart here, is like, we need protections for all applied equitably.
Agreed. And I absolutely agree with that commenter, because we don't have that. We just don't. So there is a lot and that needs to be changed still. I think it's important that constituents are vocal, patients, families are vocal about our needs, and visible. I think if we want change to happen, we need to be more visible about it.
I agree. So I want to turn to Mindy for a second. So in this space, which is quite male dominated, particularly in this state, I would imagine, can you tell us a little bit more about what your experiences have been as a small business owner that's a woman?
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not the business owner.
Okay.
I just manage the pharmacy and I'm the pharmacist.
Fair
So,
enough.
but all my owners are men, and there's not, I can't really think of very many owners in the Utah space that are local from Utah that are women or minorities. So, and I will again say that the people who own and are making a lot of the money kind of mirrors what our politicians look like in Utah. So I would like more diversity in the cannabis space, but also more diversity in our politicians. And I think that would help each other, if you know what I mean. It's hard to get a seat at the table as a woman, and it's not impossible. I think you can do it. You just have to work so much harder. And I think there's definitely been some disrespect that I've encountered. And I'm not sure if that's just cannabis. It could be in other industries as well, but I definitely feel that. And probably some advice I would give people in the industry is to really find a boss that you respect. And I have a wonderful boss who does respect my opinion, lets me voice my own opinions about things. I'm not silenced like other people would be. And I really feel like I contribute. So I feel like I'm very lucky, and I really appreciate who I work for and the company. I really appreciate Beehive Pharmacy for letting me be myself. But I do think it's rare.
Yeah,
It is.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Please jump in next. I didn't mean to step on someone.
No, it is very rare in this space to have, and like we were talking off camera before the panel started, women are usually the caregivers in the family. And so it's natural for us to gravitate towards plant medicine. It really quite natural. So it's interesting to see the dynamics when you walk in this space, because I do see that feminine side that is very nurturing and healing. And I see this very masculine side that is very driven and money, and I get that the dynamics needs to be a balance, but I would like to see a lot more women in this space. I think we should encourage them to be here. I know that, I'm going to give the floor to April on this. She has a group of women who have come together, the Kush ladies, and they are trying to create a community in a space. So I would love for her to share a little of that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So the Kush Ladies is an empowerment group. I really try to focus on women who are either in the industry or caregivers, moms, especially individuals who are caring for a patient in some aspect. Because I did find that when I got into the industry, there was some very poignant ways of approaching the marketing side. And I didn't feel that there was a lot of respect for, say, a woman who might be going through postpartum, or an individual who might have PTSD from, a sexual attack. I felt like it really just didn't give space for those individuals to kind of let go and feel vulnerable. And as a woman, and I just had a baby and I lost my brother as well, I was pretty raw. And actually, I was really grateful in hindsight that I was that raw, because it forced me to really say, as a woman, I have a unique space here. I could open up a clinic that has all of those vulnerable spaces that still allows a patient to learn about the plant, because I knew I didn't feel like I could open up in some of those aspects. I had to show up to the meetings with, and I still am, I'm a badass, but part of it is because I know that if you let your guard down, there are individuals who will eat you alive in this space, and you have to make sure that they know that I'm in the Shark Tank with you. I see you. I'm well aware of what the situation is, but I do that because I miss my patients and I need to be near them. I'll go wherever the patient goes. But as a woman, it is hard to show up sometimes and say, don't talk down to me. I'm not cute. This isn't a hobby. I'm not here like, oh, that's fun. She does this on the weekends. Like, this is my future. This is my vision. Show some respect, because I'm here. Like, we're going to do this. So it's been interesting.
It is a very interesting arena. There's a lot of gaslighting. It's a really, really tough space to function in, and not get caught up in a little bit of that. And I think if you focus your energy on helping your patients and creating a space for them that's where you're going to thrive. And that's really what I've done with TRUCE and what we've come back and started doing. We helped with the movement when the compromise, we had a ballot initiative that happened here in Utah. There was a compromise, alleged compromise between the LDS church and the individuals who were running the ballot initiative. I was not part of the compromise. We were against the compromise. I stepped away from the space and saw a lot of change just start to shift and happen. And it got really nasty. It caused a lot of contention. I mean, I sued the state. I instigated a little bit of that contention. I was very upset about how things shook out. And so it's left a little bit of a residue, I think, on the industry. Again, let me go back to the point that when you are a soldier in any kind of fight, you have a drive of just constantly being in that war. And we were constantly in that war year after year, being told no, being laughed at, being gaslighted by our legislators. Patients, I was losing patients. They were dying from their diseases, and it was getting very frustrating. And so when you go through a political battle, it's, especially for an advocate, it's those families leave an impression on you. They're the reasons why you do what you do. I know it's the reasons why April and Mindy do what they do every day. I have gone to funerals. I've sat at bedsides. I know what we're doing is the right thing. I absolutely know it is. And I know the others in this space that we get cantankerous with have that same deep-rooted feeling that I feel right now in my heart. They know this plant should not be illegal. And we're all trying in our own little space to move that needle a little more. Our egos get bruised because we're human. And we all think our vision and our way is the right way. And we're doing our best to make that portion of our little space work for the people that we love. So I know that this effort isn't at its peak right now. And we need our federal government to do something so that these spaces can function more smoothly. We're still dealing with an all cash business. At least for Mindy, she is dealing with an all cash business. We need protections for these business owners to legitimize that. Mm-hmm. And that's the normalcy that I'm looking for. On that point that April made, education. We need this in our universities. We need this in our high schools. We need this in our grade schools. DARE needs to be taken out, and this new education about what we understand about this plant needs to be taught to our children. I have kids who have watched me, the expand of this decade. My oldest was 19 when I started. My youngest was 3. And they have watched me push the needle and have been part of that journey, learning at my hip about cannabis. My 14-year-old knows more about cannabis because he learned it every day from me. We need to normalize this just like that. We need to, Mindy, I'm sure, has a conversation, and so does April with her children, the same way I do. It's open, it's not taboo, because that's how you teach and that's how you reduce harm, is through education. So I would love for us to move in a manner where the needs that April needs of education are being fulfilled, because patients need our physicians and our healthcare professionals to understand that we have an endocannabinoid system and it's real. And they weren't taught about it, but this is what we're dealing with. Mindy needs the government to function in a way so she can run a legal business. She can't write off anything. It's expensive to run an all cash business. So we need movement. And by pleading, my plead here is for people to pay attention to this issue. It's not just a bunch of people in bong water and feel good moments. Policy needs to change, and we need people to shake off their apathy towards this issue. Pay attention, like Mindy mentioned, to your legislators. Who on earth are you electing into office? Ask them how they feel about those issues. Don't let your neighbors be the only ones voting, because if you're not doing it, they're assuming and voting what they think you want. So we really need people to get involved in the issue, show up at these events, go to the companies, go to their open houses, Get to know who is running these companies. Ask questions about their products. Be an active participant in this industry is what I'm asking patients and their caregivers and the community. Those doctors who are out here who are curious about becoming QMPs and writing recommendations for patients. Just jump in, make a phone call TRUCE, call Mindy, call April. I guarantee you, we will give you however much time you need to guide you to the appropriate information, because we want this to succeed. We absolutely want this to succeed. My little soapbox speech.
And thank you for that. I'm going to take this moment just real quick to speak to the audience. Thank you for joining us tonight. We do have the opportunity when we get to the end of this discussion for us to answer your audience questions. So if you have any questions this evening, please send them in the chat so we can address them. I see your wonderful comments. I think you're saying some wonderful things. The support all of you are getting right now is really, really beautiful. But let's get some questions as well to really figure out what you can do to get involved to help make a change as we're advocating for this evening. So I'd like to move, and I would like to move to the next question, unless April, you were going to say something.
I just wanted to add one thing. When you say, you know, when we speak to our children, what we do, I will say as a person of color, the conversation that I have with my child is a little different, I think, sometimes than the conversation others have. And I just want to acknowledge that as a person who has a child whose skin color is the same as mine, I do not encourage him to go out and blow it and people in law enforcement and everyone's just look at me, I can do what I want, because he's 4 times more likely to get a felony. So I just want to remind folks that sometimes we're asking people to do something that they have been told repeatedly is not allowed for us. That's not our realm. And what I'm just hoping is, from a social equity standpoint, we are allowed a piece of the pie. That was one thing I got out of this movie, was I am here for a piece of the pie because my people have already, we've paid some dues. And I'm here to say, you know, the education matters, legal access matters, but legal access matters because it's my community that gets affected when people utilize laws and things like that to oppress an entire group. So for those folks who are watching, not having a card can mean very different things depending on where you are in society. And for some people, not having a card is what will get your children taken away. That will get your father in prison. So it's just remembering that sometimes it's a bigger scheme than just whether or not you're able to buy it for this amount or that amount. And for some of us, it's a matter of life and death.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think I really like the way the film handles that in a certain way, kind of looking at the inner dynamics of the family, the main growing family. But really, I kind of want to pull it down into speaking about the family dynamics of those of you here. But I feel like, Mindy, I haven't heard from you in a minute. What have your family dynamics been around this particular instance? Do you have some experiences to share?
With cannabis?
Yes.
Okay.
Or the industry itself.
Okay, I will say I'm fairly new to cannabis and the plant itself. The reason I got into this field is because I was a pharmacist, a retail pharmacist for about 20 years. And all my patients, I was a pharmacist during the opioid epidemic. So I'm really here to help people come off their medications and give them an alternative to things like opioids and sleeping pills and stimulants. My family is not, it was interesting to watch their response to my working in this industry, because I've seen them change their mind completely. I come from a Mormon background, and while I'm not Mormon anymore, I definitely have very conservative parents, and I have seen them do a 180, as I've seen so many of my other patients. And I am new to the industry, but I feel like I have a lot of passion for it, and I've really been educated. And I think I bring a much different perspective than a lot of people. Like, I don't have a lot of the background of being a cannabis user for most of my life. So I come at it from a different angle. I'm a very medical pharmacist. So.
Okay, thank you. Christine or April, thoughts? Anything else for that to add?
I have to just praise Mindy for a minute. She's because she's modest.
Yeah, she is.
She's very modest. I she is one of our favorites in the state. There are wonderful, and I don't want to set her too far because there's a lot of wonderful pharmacists, but she has gone really in deep to understand this plant. Like I think because of that extensive background in pharmacology, and she has this eager desire to understand more. And so I follow her on LinkedIn, and she's sending me stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And I love to get very sciencey with her on the stuff that she's learning, because that's adds to the validity of what April and I are trying to teach patients and
I
doctors.
feel like I actually feel like that's my role in this industry, is to come from an outside place, a very medical background, and help and make it more valid. Like, to me, I can see that as being my function in this industry.
And and she mentioned the opioid crisis. I use cannabis to come off of my fentanyl and all of my pharmaceutical drugs, and that's why I'm here. It gave me an entirely different lease on life, and so it's just an incredible and moving plant and movement. Can I say I don't know what issue crosses party lines quite like cannabis, because cancer really doesn't care what party you're affiliated. It doesn't care if you're a libertarian, Democrat, or Republican. We all are frail to the human condition, which is that one day we're going to die. And so this is an issue that I get to see touch so many different people that I don't know if I'd ever be in the same room with them, because our politics would ever align. But because of this issue, I was able to have some of the most amazing friendships over this past decade with people, like I said, I wouldn't have thought. In my little organization with TRUCE, I asked people to leave their labels behind, that we were really hyper focused on this together, and to kind of leave all the other politics out of it. And we would have people tabling at events together. I had an ex-priest and active Mormons at the same table event with each other. I had Democrats and Libertarians and Republicans going to events and working together on this issue. That's what I think it makes it so incredibly powerful, is it does cross some party lines, crosses a lot of barriers.
Yeah.
So.
One thing I would like to add, we were talking about how a lot of the problems in the Utah cannabis space. And I just want to say I have been in this space since it started, and I have seen such improvement. I have seen way better products. I mean, there was a time when no pharmacies had any flower available on their shelf for weeks. So we can say, and the prices too, the prices have come down. They're comparable with Nevada now. So I feel like we need to acknowledge the state and really the regulators and the industry for improving things. I know it's not perfect, but things have gotten so much better.
And honestly, Russell, it's because these two ladies have gone to these meetings with the regulators and legislators and tried to help educate what their real world experience was in different arenas. And I thank you both for your efforts on that and helping us get to where we are here. And to those that are in this space, there are growers, there are processors, there are individuals, like Mindy has stated, that really genuinely want to see this be successful, really be successessl.
I think everybody does to some extent. I think there's good in everybody. And I think that there's sometimes money just gets in the way and kind of clouds our vision. But I do think we're all in this together, and we're all like looking for the same goal in the end.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Well, and I want to say, from the family dynamic, when I work with patients, right, I did a lot of discharge for hospice. So folks are going home on tube, but culture and how a unique patient's experience matters how they'll treat their treatment plan. So, like we talk about family dynamics, how do these things impact us in business? It impacts us in our life. And because we're all unique, it's nice to see that the diversity come into the industry slowly, if for no other reason than there are a bunch of different patients, and every single patient in the hospital, when you tell a patient, eat eat this or do this exercise. They're going to hear it from their own unique perspective. And I think the cannabis industry is like that. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot of different personalities, but each one's coming from these unique perspectives, just like patients. And when you send a patient home on discharge, you kind of hope for the best, but sometimes it just all blows up and you get to start all over. And I've seen that happen here. Like things blow up, folks, you know, thought it was going to go this way and the law changes and then you have to restructure. But in the end, for me, it was, you know, patients have legal access and I'm no longer having to tell a patient, I don't know what to tell you about that option, but don't bring that up in the doctor's office. I don't have to do that anymore. And for me, that is progress. And to have doctors reach out to me and to say, hey, tell me about this endocannabinoid system, but in a very private way that they know, hey, I can trust you. I can trust you to have this conversation. That's been humbling, to say the least, because I know how terrifying it is. You work for 8 years, 12 years on a degree, and then say one word and your whole community shuns you. That's a real fear for individuals in the professional space. And I think we should remember that folks don't always get in the industry to just make a lot of money, to just step on patients. Are there individuals in every market that do that? Absolutely. But there's also, I know for me, providers, nurses who are so hungry for knowledge, so ready, but they just need that right conversation, that right space. And I think they're starting to get that with the pharmacists, with the clinics, but it is those specialists. It's those of us who jumped out in the beginning, who said, okay, say what you want about me, but I need to be a part of this because patients are hungry and so am I. Those individuals now can help these doctors feel more comfortable, but we have to be able to stand on a platform and say, I'm not ashamed that I got in from the beginning and that I'm in the industry. I absolutely am a part of this space, and I'm a part of healthcare, and I'm here to help people. So I think just remembering everyone has a different agenda.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation. We're going to move to our last question. And I'm just going to kind of start off with each of you. I think I will start with you, Mindy. What does the future look like for you?
My personal future, I see myself in a lot more research. I do want to always be working with patients. That is my passion. And I see the future of Utah cannabis being amazing products, really good craft quality flower. The future of my company, I can envision Beehive Farmacy being the place for good quality craft flower, kind of like the smaller business farmers market craft. I do have a lot of, it's really difficult for me working in a very rural location in Brigham City. I'm up against these multi-state operators and big business companies that kind of operate as like an Amazon.com with really deep pockets. So I really want to move to really good quality products. That's going to be my purpose.
Thank you. April, what's the future for you?
I really want to see patients get quality education, and I just really want to see the access full fold with the hospitals. There are patients who don't go home at night. That's my niche. Everyone knows I love the complex care. I love the ones that have the 15 med list and the big. Those individuals aren't in a space to have the luxury of walking in a dispensary sometimes or picking out, their favorite product because it has a high THC. I really want to see that access treated with respect and legitimacy so that folks can step away from the stigmas and just start making good decisions for themselves and focus on quality of life, because that should be all that matters. Whether you like politics, whether you are in the industry, whether you're a patient, quality of life matters. It really does.
Basic human rights.
Yep.
Christine, please send us out.
Oh, for me, I'm going to continue helping raise awareness. I've gotten connected with some international regulatory groups so that I can build out my skill set and be a bit of a watchdog for patients and make sure we have good quality product out there. As for my nonprofit, for TRUCE, we're working on building a community for patients. There's a lot of individuals coming to plant medicine, not just cannabis, but psilocybin. And they would like to be around others who understand these evogens, and we want to build opportunities for them to have friendships with others who have gone through the experience. I noticed that it's very much a industry product exchange base, and I would like to build a community. So when April has her families, they can say, oh, well, there's a family get together, and it's a cannabis family that really starts to build out. So I would like to see TRUCE to continue making and creating events that we all can learn together.
Thank you
So-
all.
Mhm.
All right, that's it. This has been such a great discussion. I really thank all of our panelists for joining us this evening. And I thank you out there in the audience for joining us this evening as well. This has been the Ladybuds post-film discussion. Thank you for joining us for the end of our Women's History Month with this film, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.